Maya cross-checked her equipment one more time as the shuttle prepared for descent. The readings on her scanner showed nothing but deadly life forms covering the planet below. Zarian 7 was supposed to be a routine survey mission, but Maya knew better than to trust routine when dealing with unknown worlds. "All systems green, Lieutenant Commander," said Kevin Walsh from the pilot seat. The young doctor had joined their team just 3 months ago, fresh out of xenobiology training. His enthusiasm reminded Maya of herself when she first started exploring the galaxy. Lisa Martinez sat behind them, checking her rifle and combat gear. The sergeant never went anywhere without being ready for trouble. Her military training had saved their team more times than Maya could count. "Atmosphere looks breathable," Lisa said, "but those predator readings are off the charts." Tony Blake worked on the shuttle's communication array, his fingers dancing across the controls. The engineer was quiet but brilliant, always making sure their equipment worked perfectly. "Signals strong with the constellation," he reported. "Captain Morrison wants updates every 2 hours." Maya nodded and looked out the viewport at the planet below. Zarian 7 was beautiful in a terrifying way. Dense forests covered most of the surface, broken by massive mountain ranges and deep valleys. The atmosphere was thick with moisture, creating a greenhouse effect that supported incredible biodiversity. Unfortunately, most of that biodiversity wanted to kill anything that moved. "Remember the briefing," Maya said to her team. "We stay together, collect samples, and get out. No heroics, no extended exploration. The galaxy has never seen predators like the ones on this world." The shuttle shook as they entered the atmosphere. Kevin fought the controls as unexpected wind patterns buffeted their small craft. "These air currents are crazy," he muttered. "It's like the planet doesn't want us here." Maya watched the scanner as massive shapes moved through the forest below. The creatures were huge, some as large as ancient earth elephants, but they moved with the speed and grace of hunting cats. "Stay alert," she warned. "Those things down there have been the top of the food chain for millions of years." The shuttle lurched suddenly as alarms began blaring. Tony's instruments showed a massive gravitational anomaly appearing directly in their path. Where did that come from? He shouted over the noise. Kevin pulled hard on the controls, trying to change course, but the anomaly was too strong. The shuttle was being pulled toward the planet's surface like a stone dropping into water. "I can't break free," he yelled. "We're going down." Maya grabbed the emergency beacon and activated it. The signal would reach the constellation and let them know what happened. She hoped Captain Morrison would be able to mount a rescue mission, but deep down she knew the chances were slim. No one had ever survived a crash on Zarian 7, the shuttle. Hit the forest canopy with tremendous force. Trees snapped like twigs as they plowed through the dense growth. Maya felt her safety harness cut into her chest as they tumbled through the air. The world spun around her in a blur of green and brown. The final impact threw her against the bulkhead. Pain exploded through her left shoulder and ribs as metal twisted around her. She heard Kevin scream, then nothing. The shuttle skidded across the forest floor, tearing through undergrowth and smaller trees before finally coming to rest against a massive boulder. Maya opened her eyes to find herself hanging upside down in her harness. Blood dripped from a cut on her forehead, and her left arm hung at an odd angle. She could hear the shuttle systems dying around her, sparks flying from damaged circuits. "Kevin?" she called out, but there was no answer. She turned her head, painfully, to see the pilot slumped over his controls, his neck bent at an impossible angle. Kevin was dead. "Lisa? Tony?" Maya tried to twist around to see the back of the shuttle. Lisa was pinned under a piece of the ceiling, her eyes staring at nothing. Tony's body was crushed against the rear bulkhead, his blood covering the communication equipment. Maya was alone. She hung there for several minutes, trying to process what had happened. 3 of her closest friends were dead, and she was trapped on the most dangerous planet in known space. Her left arm was definitely broken, and she could feel at least 2 cracked ribs. Her survival suit was torn, and the helmet was cracked but still functional. The shuttle's emergency power was failing. She had maybe an hour before the life support system shut down completely. After that, she would be breathing the planet's atmosphere directly. The air was safe for humans, but it would also carry the scent of her crash to every predator for miles around. Maya managed to release her harness and drop to what used to be the ceiling. Every movement sent pain through her injured arm, but she forced herself to search the wreckage for supplies. She found a small survival kit, some food rations, and a damaged scanner. The rifle rack was twisted shut, but she managed to pry it open and retrieve Lisa's weapon. Outside the shuttle, she could hear sounds that made her blood run cold. Deep growls echoed through the forest, getting closer. Whatever lived in these woods had heard the crash and was coming to investigate. Maya had studied the planet's wildlife from orbit, but being down here with them was completely different. She pulled her scanner from the survival kit and activated it. The screen flickered to life, showing multiple large signatures moving through the forest around the crash site. The creatures were huge, and they were converging on her position from all directions. She counted at least 12 distinct signals, each one representing a predator that could kill her without effort. The shuttle's hull groaned as something large brushed against it. Maya held her breath and gripped the rifle tighter. Through a crack in the twisted metal, she could see a shadow moving past the wreckage. It was massive, easily twice the size of a human, and it moved with deadly silence despite its bulk. Maya knew she had to make a decision. She could stay in the shuttle and hope the creatures would lose interest and move on, or she could try to escape and find better shelter before they decided to investigate more closely. Both options seemed impossible, but staying here meant certain death. When her air ran out, the shadow passed by again, and this time Maya got a better look. The creature was covered in dark fur that seemed to shift and change color as it moved. 6 powerful legs carried it across the forest floor without making a sound. Its head was massive, with jaws that could crush a human skull like an egg. Maya had read about creatures like this in the preliminary reports. The survey team had called them shadow maws because of their ability to blend into their surroundings, and their terrifying bite. They were pack hunters, intelligent and ruthless. If one was here, the others would not be far behind. She checked her scanner again. The signals were getting closer, and now she could see they were moving in a coordinated pattern. These creatures were not just following their noses to investigate the crash. They were hunting her with purpose and intelligence. Maya made her choice. She would wait until dark, then try to escape the shuttle and find a more defensible position. It was not much of a plan, but it was better than waiting here to die. She settled back against the twisted metal and tried to ignore the pain in her arm and ribs. The galaxy might be watching her through the emergency beacon, but she was truly alone now. Every alien species that monitored deep space communications would see the signal from Zarian 7 and shake their heads sadly. Another promising human expedition had met the same fate as all the others who dared to explore the death worlds, but Maya Cross was not ready to become just another casualty report. She was going to survive this, no matter what it took. Maya waited until the planet's twin suns disappeared behind the forest canopy before making her move. The sounds outside the shuttle had changed as darkness fell. The deep growls were replaced by softer huffing noises, and she could hear the creatures moving through the underbrush with careful steps. She had used the daylight hours to study them through the cracks in the shuttle's hull. The shadow maws were even more impressive up close than the orbital scans had suggested. They moved like liquid darkness, their fur shifting color to match their surroundings. Maya counted 6 legs on each creature with powerful claws that could tear through metal. What impressed her most was their intelligence. They did not charge at the shuttle or try to break it open. Instead, they circled it at a distance, studying the wreckage with what looked like curiosity. One of them had even approached the emergency beacon and examined it carefully before backing away. Maya gathered her few supplies and checked her rifle one more time. The weapon had survived the crash, but she only had 2 spare power cells. Against creatures this size, she would need every shot to count. She also grabbed a piece of twisted metal that could serve as a crude knife. The shuttle's emergency hatch was jammed, but Maya managed to force it open just enough to squeeze through. She moved slowly, trying not to make any noise that would attract attention. Her broken arm throbbed with each movement, but she forced herself to ignore the pain. The forest floor was soft under her feet, covered with thick moss and fallen leaves. Maya stayed low and moved from tree to tree, using the massive trunks as cover. Her scanner showed the shadow maws were still in the area, but they seemed to be moving in a wider circle around the crash site. She found a small cave about half a mile from the shuttle. It was barely large enough for her to crawl inside, but it would provide some protection from the elements and the predators. Maya settled in for the night, keeping her rifle ready and her scanner active. The sounds of the forest were unlike anything she had ever heard. There were calls and cries from creatures she could not identify, mixed with the occasional roar of something large and dangerous. The shadow maws were not the only predators on Zarian 7, just the most successful ones. Maya used the quiet hours to think about her situation. The Constellation would be looking for her, but Captain Morrison would not risk his crew by sending them down to the planet's surface. The best she could hope for was that they would monitor her emergency beacon and wait for a safe opportunity to attempt a rescue. The problem was that there might never be a safe opportunity. Zarian 7 was a death world for good reason. Every creature that lived here had evolved to be a perfect killer. The plants were poisonous, the insects were venomous, and the larger animals were apex predators that had never learned to fear anything. Maya had read reports from other exploration teams that had encountered similar worlds. The standard survival protocol was to find shelter, conserve resources, and wait for rescue. But those protocols were written for normal planets, not for places like Zarian 7, where everything was trying to kill you. She spent the first week following the standard procedures. Anyway, during the day she stayed hidden in her cave and observed the wildlife around her. At night she ventured out to collect water and search for edible plants. Her food rations would only last a few more days, and she needed to find alternative sources of nutrition. The shadow maws visited her area regularly, but they never came close enough to threaten her directly. Maya began to notice patterns in their behavior. They hunted in groups of 3 or 4, working together to bring down prey much larger than themselves. They communicated through a series of growls, chirps, and body language that was surprisingly complex. What fascinated Maya most was their social structure. The groups were not random collections of individuals. Each pack had a clear hierarchy, with one dominant member making decisions for the others. The subordinate members followed orders without question, but they also showed initiative and problem-solving abilities that suggested high intelligence. Maya started keeping notes about their behavior in her scanner's memory. She documented their hunting patterns, their communication methods, and their territorial boundaries. It was partly scientific curiosity and partly practical necessity. The more she understood about these creatures, the better her chances of avoiding them. On the 8th day, something changed. Maya was watching a pack of 4 shadow maws hunt a large herbivore when she noticed they were using tactics she had never seen before. Instead of surrounding their prey in a simple circle, they were using the terrain to their advantage. One member drove the animal toward a cliff while the others positioned themselves to cut off escape routes. The hunt was successful, but what happened next surprised Maya even more. The pack did not immediately begin feeding. Instead, they performed what looked like a ritual. The dominant member approached the kill first, but did not take the best portions. Instead, it marked the carcass with its scent and stepped back to allow the others to feed. Maya realized she was watching something that the scientific community had never documented. The shadow maws were not just intelligent predators. They had culture, traditions, and social customs that governed their behavior. They were not mindless killing machines, but a sophisticated species with their own way of life. This revelation changed everything. Maya began to see the shadow maws not as monsters to be avoided, but as beings to be understood. If they had culture and intelligence, then maybe there was a way to communicate with them. Maybe she could find a way to coexist with them instead of simply hiding from them. Her scanner beeped softly, indicating movement nearby. Maya looked up to see a lone shadow maw standing at the edge of the clearing where she had been watching. It was smaller than the others she had seen, probably a younger member of the pack. The creature was looking directly at her hiding spot. Maya held perfectly still, hardly daring to breathe. The shadow maw took a step closer, its head tilted in what looked like curiosity. It made a soft chirping sound, different from the growls and roars she had heard before. The sound was almost questioning, as if the creature was trying to communicate. For a moment, Maya considered responding. She could make a sound back, see if the creature would react. But her survival training took over and she remained silent and motionless. The shadow maw watched her for several more minutes, then turned and walked away. That night, Maya could not sleep. She kept thinking about the young shadow maw and the way it had looked at her. There had been intelligence in those eyes and something else. Curiosity, maybe even a desire to communicate. Maya began to wonder if she had been approaching her survival all wrong, instead of just hiding and waiting for rescue. Maybe she should be trying to understand this world and its inhabitants. The shadow maws were the dominant species on Zarian 7 for a reason. They had survived and thrived in an environment that killed everything else. Maybe she could learn from them. Maya made a decision that would have seemed insane to anyone else. Instead of continuing to hide from the shadow maws, she was going to study them more closely. She was going to learn their language, understand their culture, and find a way to communicate with them. It was a dangerous plan, but Maya was running out of options. Her food was almost gone, and her shelter was becoming less secure each day. The standard survival protocols were not going to save her on a world like this. She needed to try something different, something that had never been attempted before. The galaxy was watching her through the emergency beacon, waiting for her signal to fade and disappear, but Maya Cross was not ready to give up. She was going to survive Zarian 7, and she was going to do it by becoming something that no human had ever been before. Maya began her new approach on the 15th day after the crash. She had used the past week to observe the shadow maws more closely, learning their daily routines and mapping their territory. The pack that frequented her area consisted of 5 members. With a large female who was clearly the leader, the first step was to make herself known to them without appearing threatening. Maya chose a spot near a stream where the pack came to drink each morning. She positioned herself on a fallen log about 50 feet away, making sure she was visible but not blocking their path to the water. The shadow maws noticed her immediately when they arrived. The leader stopped and studied Maya carefully while the others remained behind her. Maya sat perfectly still, keeping her hands visible and her rifle slung across her back. She had learned that sudden movements would cause them to disappear into the forest within seconds. The leader made a series of low growls that Maya interpreted as warnings. The other pack members responded with submissive postures, lowering their heads and backing away slightly. Maya realized she was witnessing their communication system in action. The leader was telling the others to stay alert while she assessed. This strange new creature. Maya slowly reached into her pack and pulled out a piece of dried fruit from her emergency rations. She placed it on the log beside her and then moved back several steps. The gesture was meant to show that she was not a threat and might even be offering a gift. The leader approached cautiously, sniffing the air as she moved. When she reached the log, she examined the fruit carefully before picking it up in her massive jaws. She did not eat it immediately but carried it back to her pack. The other members gathered around as she dropped the fruit, and they all sniffed it together. Maya watched this interaction with growing excitement. The shadow maws were not just intelligent but showed complex social behaviors. They made group decisions and shared information with each other. The leader had not simply taken the gift for herself, but had brought it back to share with the others. Over the next several days, Maya repeated this routine. She would appear at the stream in the morning, leave a small offering, and then retreat to a safe distance. The shadow maws began to expect her presence and seemed less wary each time. The leader even began to acknowledge Maya with what looked like a nod before approaching the offering. Maya started to vary her gifts to learn more about their preferences. They showed little interest in her processed food rations but were fascinated by natural items like interesting rocks, colorful flowers, and unusual pieces of wood. She began to understand that they appreciated things that were unique. all beautiful rather than simply edible. The breakthrough came on the 23rd day. Maya was sitting by the stream when she noticed the young shadow maw she had encountered before approaching alone. The creature was much smaller than the others and moved with the uncertain gait of adolescence. It stopped about 20 feet away from Maya and made a soft chirping sound. Maya decided to try something bold. She chirped back, attempting to mimic the sound as closely as possible. The young shadow maw tilted its head and chirped again, this time with a different tone. Maya tried to copy that sound as well, though she knew her human vocal cords could not produce the exact frequencies. The exchange continued for several minutes, with the young shadow maw teaching Maya basic sounds and Maya doing her best to learn. It was clear that the creature was enjoying the interaction and was patient with Maya's clumsy attempts at pronunciation. When the rest of the pack arrived, they found Maya and the young one engaged in their lesson. The leader watched this interaction with what Maya could only describe as curiosity. She did not intervene or call the young one away, but instead settled down to observe. Maya realized she was experiencing something that no human had ever witnessed. Before, she was having a conversation with an alien predator, and it was actually working. The sounds they were making had meaning and structure. This was not just animal communication, but a true language. Over the following weeks, Maya's vocabulary grew rapidly. She learned that the shadow maws had different sounds for different types of prey, various weather conditions, and emotional states. They had specific calls for danger, food, and social interactions. Their language was complex and sophisticated, with subtle variations that conveyed different meanings. The young shadow maw became her primary teacher, visiting her almost daily to continue their lessons. Maya named him Scout because he was always the first to explore new areas and investigate unusual things. Scout seemed to enjoy having a student and would often bring her new words to learn. Maya also began to understand their social structure better. The pack was not just a hunting group, but a family unit with strong emotional bonds. They cared for each other, shared resources, and made decisions together. The leader, whom Maya called Apex, was not a tyrant but a respected member who had earned her position through wisdom and strength. The other pack members gradually accepted Maya's presence. They would nod to her when they passed and sometimes brought her interesting objects they had found. Maya began to feel like she was becoming part of their extended community. Though she was careful never to overstep her boundaries, Maya's biggest challenge was learning to think like a predator. The shadow maws viewed the world very differently from humans. They saw everything in terms of territory, resources, and potential threats. They had no concept of mercy or compassion as humans understood it, but they had their own code of honor and respect. She learned that they respected strength and intelligence above all else. Physical power was important, but cunning and problem-solving abilities were equally valued. Maya began to demonstrate these qualities by solving puzzles that Scout would present to her and by showing creative ways to obtain food and shelter. The galactic community continued to monitor Maya's signal through the emergency beacon. Alien. Scientists were baffled by the readings they were receiving. The human was not just surviving on Zarion 7, but appeared to be thriving. Her movement patterns showed she was traveling with the planet's apex predators rather than hiding from them. Captain Morrison aboard the Constellation was equally confused by the data. Dr. Amanda Foster, the ship's xenobiologist, had been studying the sensor readings for weeks. The information suggested that Maya was not only alive but had somehow integrated herself into the local ecosystem. Maya herself was unaware of the attention she was receiving from the galaxy. She was too focused on her daily survival and her growing relationship with the Shadow Maw pack. Each day brought new challenges and new discoveries about these remarkable creatures. The turning point came when Maya witnessed a territorial dispute between her pack and another group of Shadow Maws. The confrontation was intense but followed strict rules of engagement. It was more like a formal duel than a savage battle. Maya watched as the two leaders faced off while their respective packs formed circles around them. The fight was brief but decisive. Apex emerged victorious, and the rival pack retreated without further conflict. Maya realized she had witnessed something like a courtroom proceeding. where disputes were settled through combat but within established rules and traditions. After the confrontation, Apex approached Maya directly for the first time. The massive predator looked into Maya's eyes and made a series of complex sounds that Maya had never heard before. Scout translated quietly, explaining that Apex was acknowledging Maya as a member of their territory and under their protection. Maya felt a surge of emotion as she realized what this meant. She was no longer just a survivor hiding on an alien world. She had become part of something greater, accepted by creatures that had never shown such trust to any outsider before. The galaxy was watching her signal, expecting it to fade at any moment. But Maya Cross was not just surviving anymore. She was learning to be something new, something that had never existed before in the known universe. Maya's real test came on the 40th day when Apex decided she was ready to join their hunt. The pack leader approached Maya at dawn with a series of commanding growls that Scout translated as an invitation to prove her worth as a hunter. Maya felt both excitement and terror as she realized what this meant. The Shadowmaws had been patient teachers, but hunting was different from communication. This was about life and death, about proving that she belonged in their world, not just as a curiosity but as a contributing member of their pack. Maya gathered her makeshift weapons and followed Apex deeper into the forest than she had ever ventured before. The prey they were tracking was a massive herbivore that Maya had only seen from a distance. The creature was called a thornback by the Shadowmaws, and it was easily 3 times the size of any of them. Its thick hide was covered with sharp spines, and its powerful legs could crush a Shadowmaw with a single kick. Maya watched as the pack moved into position with practiced precision. Each member had a specific role in the hunt, and they communicated through subtle gestures and barely audible sounds. Apex was the strategist, directing the others from a central position. Scout was the scout, moving ahead to track the prey and report back on its movements. The other pack members took flanking positions, ready to drive the thornback toward the killing ground that Apex had selected. Maya realized she was witnessing millions of years of evolution in action. These creatures had perfected the art of cooperative hunting to a degree that no human military unit could match. Apex looked at Maya and made a series of quick gestures. Scout translated quietly, explaining that Maya was being given the honor of making the first move. She would approach the thornback from the front, drawing its attention while the others moved into position. It was a test of courage as much as skill. Maya's heart pounded as she crept through the underbrush toward the massive creature. The thornback was feeding peacefully, unaware that death was approaching from multiple directions. Maya had studied its behavior for weeks, learning its patterns and weaknesses. She knew that it would charge at any threat, making it predictable despite its size. When Maya stepped into the open, the thornback's reaction was immediate and violent. The creature let out a roar that shook the forest and lowered its massive head to charge. Maya had expected this response, but the reality of facing such a monster was overwhelming. Every instinct told her to run, but she forced herself to stand. Her ground dot at the last possible moment, Maya dove to one side as the thornback thundered past. The creature's momentum carried it directly into the trap that Apex had prepared. The other pack members attacked from both sides, using their claws and teeth to bring down the massive herbivore. Maya's role was not finished, as the thornback struggled against its attackers. She used her human agility to climb onto its back. With her makeshift spear, she struck at the creature's neck, finding the weak spot that would end its suffering quickly. The thornback collapsed, and the hunt was over. The pack's reaction to Maya's performance was immediate and profound. Apex approached her with what could only be described as pride, making approving sounds that needed no translation. The other pack members gathered around Maya, touching her gently with their massive paws in a gesture of acceptance and respect. Scout explained that Maya had done something remarkable. She had not only participated in the hunt but had adapted human tactics to complement their natural abilities. Her climbing skills and tool use had impressed the entire pack. She was no longer just a tolerated outsider, but a valuable member of their hunting team. Over the following weeks, Maya participated in many more hunts. Each one taught her something new about the Shadow Maws and about herself. She learned to read the forest signs that indicated prey movements, to communicate silently over long distances, and to think strategically about complex problems. Maya also began to understand the broader social structure of Shadow Maw society. Her pack was just one of many that inhabited different territories across the continent. They had trading relationships with some groups, territorial disputes with others, and complex alliances that shifted based on seasonal changes and resource availability. The most surprising discovery came when Maya met representatives from other packs. Scout had arranged a gathering at a neutral meeting ground where different groups could interact safely. Maya was fascinated to learn that each pack had developed its own cultural variations and specializations. Some packs were master trackers, who could follow prey for days across any terrain. Others were expert climbers who hunted in the mountain regions. There were even packs that specialized in aquatic hunting, working together to bring down the massive creatures that lived in Zerion 7's deep lakes. Maya realized that she was witnessing something that the galactic scientific community had never imagined. The Shadow Maws were not just intelligent predators, but a complex civilization with regional differences, specialized knowledge, and cultural traditions that had been passed down for generations. The other pack leaders were initially suspicious of Maya, but her reputation as a skilled hunter and her obvious acceptance by Apex's pack gradually won their respect. They began to see her not as an alien intruder but as a unique asset who could contribute new ideas and perspectives to their ancient ways. Maya's human creativity began to influence Shadow Maw hunting techniques in unexpected ways. She introduced the concept of tool modification, showing them how to sharpen sticks and stones to create better weapons. She also demonstrated trap-making techniques that allowed them to catch prey without direct confrontation. The Shadow Maws were quick to adopt these innovations, but they also improved upon them in ways that Maya had not anticipated. Their superior strength and agility allowed them to create tools and traps that were far more effective than anything Maya could have managed alone. Maya's influence extended beyond hunting techniques. She began to serve as a mediator between different packs, using her outsider status to help resolve conflicts and negotiate agreements. Her human perspective allowed her to see solutions that the Shadow Maws, despite their intelligence, had never considered. The galaxy continued to monitor Maya's signal, and the data they were receiving was becoming increasingly impossible to explain. The human was not just surviving on Zerion 7, but appeared to be thriving in ways that defied all understanding of predator-prey relationships. Dr. Amanda Foster aboard the Constellation had been studying the sensor readings for months. The information suggested that Maya was not only traveling with the Shadow Maws, but was somehow influencing their behavior on a massive scale. Movement patterns across entire continents were changing in response to her presence. Captain Morrison was facing pressure from the Galactic Council to explain what was happening on Zerion 7. The implications were staggering. If a single human could integrate with the galaxy's most feared predators, what did that say about humanity's potential role in the broader cosmic community? Maya herself was unaware of the attention she was receiving from the wider galaxy. She was too focused on her daily life as a member of the Shadow Maw community and her growing understanding of their complex society. Each day brought new challenges and discoveries that expanded her knowledge of what it meant to be truly alive in the universe. The transformation that had begun with her crash landing was now complete. Maya Cross was no longer just a human survivor on an alien world. She had become something entirely new, a bridge between two completely different forms of consciousness and a living example of what was possible when intelligence and instinct worked together. The galaxy was watching her signal, but they were no longer expecting it to fade. They were beginning to realize that Maya had accomplished something that would change their understanding of what it meant to be human. Maya felt the vibrations through the ground before she heard the familiar sound of approaching shuttles. 6 months had passed since her crash, and she had almost forgotten what human technology sounded like. The Shadow Maw pack around her tensed. As the strange noises grew louder, their ears flattening against their heads in concern, Apex looked to Maya for guidance, a gesture that still amazed her after all this time. The massive predator who ruled this territory was asking a human for advice about how to handle this new situation. Maya placed her hand on Apex's flank in a calming gesture and spoke in the mixed language of growls and words that had become natural to her. "These are my people," Maya explained to the pack. "They come in flying machines like the one I crashed in. They are not a threat, but they will be afraid of you." Scout moved closer to Maya, his young face showing curiosity rather than fear. Over the months, he had become her closest friend among the Shadow Maws, and his trust in her was complete. The other pack members positioned themselves behind Apex, ready to follow her lead but clearly nervous about this new development. Maya had known this moment would come eventually. The Constellation had been monitoring her emergency beacon for months, and Captain Morrison would not abandon her without at least attempting a rescue. She had prepared for this day, but now that it was here, she felt torn between two worlds. The shuttles landed in the clearing that Maya had designated as a safe meeting place. She watched as the ramps lowered and familiar figures emerged. Captain Morrison led the team, followed by Dr. Amanda Foster and a squad of Marines in full combat gear. Their weapons were ready, and their eyes scanned the forest for signs of the deadly predators they expected to find. Maya stepped out of the tree line with Apex beside her. The sight of a human walking calmly next to the galaxy's most feared predator caused an immediate reaction from the rescue team. Several Marines raised their weapons, but Captain Morrison held up a hand to stop them. "Stand down," Morrison ordered, his voice tight with amazement. "Maya, is that really you?" Maya smiled and walked closer, keeping her movements slow and non-threatening. Apex matched her pace, her massive form radiating controlled power. The other pack members remained hidden in the forest, but Maya knew they were watching every move the humans made. "Hello, Captain," Maya said, her voice carrying the confidence of someone who had faced death and emerged stronger. "I am glad you came, but as you can see, I am not exactly in need of rescue anymore." Dr. Foster stepped forward, her scientific mind racing to process what she was seeing. "Maya, how is this possible? The data we have been receiving suggested you were traveling with the Shadow Maws, but we never imagined anything like this." Maya reached out and touched Apex's head, and the massive predator leaned into her touch like a giant cat. "It took time to understand them," Maya explained. "They are not mindless killers. They have culture, language, and honor. They are more civilized than most species I have encountered." Captain Morrison struggled to accept what he was seeing. "Maya, you have been declared dead by the Galactic Council. Your survival here is being studied by every major scientific institution in known space. The implications of what you have accomplished are staggering," Maya nodded slowly. She had suspected that her situation would attract attention, but she had not fully considered the broader implications. "What kind of implications?" Dr. Foster pulled out her scanner and began taking readings. "Maya, if humans can not only survive but integrate with apex predators, it changes everything we thought we knew about interspecies relations. The Shadow Maws have been considered the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy for centuries." Apex made a low growling sound that Maya recognized as amusement. She translated for the humans. "She finds it funny that you call them dangerous. They think of themselves as protectors of their territory and their pack." The Marines remained tense, their training telling them that they were in mortal danger despite the evidence of their eyes. Maya understood their fear, but she also knew that her pack would not attack unless they were threatened first. "I need to show you something," Maya said to Captain Morrison. "But first, your people need to put away their weapons." The Shadow Maws consider drawn weapons to be a sign of hostile intent. Morrison hesitated, then gave the order. The Marines reluctantly lowered their rifles, though they remained ready to react at the first sign of danger. Maya appreciated their discipline, but she also knew that their fear was unnecessary. Maya called out in the Shadow Maw language, and Scout emerged from the forest. The young predator approached cautiously, his eyes fixed on the strange new visitors. Maya introduced him to the humans, explaining his role as her teacher and friend. Dr. Foster was amazed as she watched Maya and Scout communicate. The conversation was a mixture of sounds, gestures, and facial expressions that clearly had meaning and structure. Maya, you have learned their language. This is unprecedented in galactic history. Maya smiled. It is more than language. I have learned their way of thinking, their values, and their customs. They have taught me things about survival and cooperation that no human textbook could ever contain. Captain Morrison realized that the situation was far more complex than a simple rescue mission. Maya, what do you want to do? We can take you back to the constellation, but I suspect that is not what you have in mind. Maya looked at Apex, then at Scout, then at the forest where the rest of her pack was waiting. These creatures had saved her life and welcomed her into their world. She had responsibilities to them now that went beyond her duty as a human explorer. I want to stay, Maya said simply, but I also want to build a bridge between our species. The Shadow Maws have knowledge and abilities that could benefit humanity, and we have things that could help them as well. Dr. Foster's eyes lit up with scientific excitement, a permanent research station, a place where humans and Shadow Maws could work together. The discoveries we could make would revolutionize our understanding of predator intelligence and interspecies cooperation. Maya nodded. The Shadow Maws have already agreed to this in principle. They are curious about humans and want to learn more about our technology and our ways. They see the potential for mutual benefit. Over the following hours, Maya served as translator and mediator as the two groups began to understand each other. The Shadow Maws were fascinated by human technology, while the humans were amazed by the sophisticated social structures and hunting techniques of the predators. Captain Morrison contacted the constellation and reported the unprecedented situation. Within hours, representatives from the Galactic Council were requesting permission to establish a permanent research facility on Zarian 7. Maya found herself at the center of negotiations that would reshape galactic understanding of predator species. The agreement that emerged was unlike anything in galactic history. Zarian 7 would become a joint research facility where humans and Shadow Maws could work together to explore the mysteries of the universe. Maya would serve as the primary liaison between the two species, using her unique position to facilitate cooperation and understanding. As the first permanent structures were being planned, Maya stood with Apex on the hill overlooking the valley where she had first crashed. The massive predator looked at her with what Maya had learned to recognize as pride and affection. You have done something remarkable, Apex said in her deep, rumbling voice. You have shown both our species that cooperation is stronger than conflict. Maya smiled and placed her hand on her friend's massive head. We did it together. You taught me that survival is not about being the strongest or the most dangerous. It is about understanding your place in the world and finding others who share your values. The galaxy had watched Maya perish in that crash 6 months ago, but she had returned as something more than human. She had become a bridge between worlds, a living proof that intelligence and courage could overcome any obstacle. The Shadow Maws were no longer seen as mindless killers but as potential allies in humanity's exploration of the cosmos. Maya Cross had survived the unsurvivable and achieved the impossible. She had not only tamed the apex predators but had learned to become one herself, earning her place in their world through wisdom, courage, and respect. The galaxy would never look at humanity the same way again.